Maybe.
Hello, and welcome to Chit Chat Live for the week of May 30th, 2016. This week we will be talking about Genealogy Roadshow Season 3, Episode 3, when we're in Houston, Texas. And we seem to have the whole crew with us again this week. How are you tonight, ladies?
Good, good. Hello.
Fantastic.
I, fi-
Hello.
I figured that was the easiest way to introduce everybody because we have the regular gang with us tonight. We have we have Sherry and Jen and Melissa and Terry and Val going down the row. So, ladies, how are we all doing this evening?
Doing
Good.
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 Bloodshot
Good.
eyes from looking at the computer all day and watching the live stream from a conference, and it's like that's why the camera's far away.
Can't blame you. Can't blame you. So everybody watched the episode from Houston this week, I assume. Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
about half an hour ago.
Oh, but at least you saw it, Jen. That's
Yes.
what's important.
And the ink isn't even dry on your notes yet, right, Jen?
Yeah.
Oh, too funny, too funny. So, well, why don't we go ahead and dive on in unless anybody has any other genealogy tidbits they want to make sure that we put out this week. Any genealogy announcements before we dive into Roadshow?
You know, Ancestry released those Indiana Vital Records.
I
Oh,
know.
that's right.
It was exciting for all of us Hoosiers out there. It was very, very exciting week in
Yes,
Ancestry.
I spent most of last night after I was done with the webinar I presented for the Ontario Genealogical Society, where I was talking about newspapers. As soon as I got off there, I'm like, I have to go and check out Ancestry and check out these new records that they have available. And so I started downloading like crazy all these death certificates for pretty much every generation I could think of, and it was pretty cool. Like a lot of them, there were new things that I learned about, how they had passed, or of course the interesting misspellings and so forth that you always see.
Yes.
But it was good, and I found out, and growing up, I was fortunate in that my great grandparents were both alive when I was young, and apparently in 1981, and so had my grandfather on my mom's side in that same year. In my mind, they were like years apart. I had never really like put that together. And then I was like, wow, I lost both of them that year, and I was, just a little kid. But I don't even remember, I don't think they had a funeral or anything for my great-grandfather. But
Maybe you just
yeah, it's kind of weird, like, after the fact realizing, oh, that was like the same year. Weird.
Yeah, that's on
Yeah.
my to-do list for this weekend. I actually went out this afternoon to try to do a little bit of research, and I got errors on Ancestry. So I'm just going to say that they were overloaded.
Probably.
Yeah.
The one thing to keep in mind is all of the women, no matter if they have their maiden name listed, at
It
least
wasn't
in the
indexed.
birth records, they're all under the husband's name, even if they're not married.
Hmm.
I
That's
just
good
want
to know.
to. I just
The
want to
few
say.
records that I put corrections in for.
What were you saying, Melissa?
I was just gonna say I'm just really depressed because I have no one who was born or died in Indiana.
What about marriages?
No marriages either. I think my family avoided them like that state like the plague or something.
I'm being all down and depressed because one of my clients, I had a ball working with Indiana records. In fact, one particular year, I went to Allen County Library, in Fort Wayne to do research for this client. Well, then she retired and wanted to do her own. So now I need to pass on to her to let her know that this new database, because she's maybe not in touch with, what's going on currently. And it's like, I don't want to tell her. Maybe I'll just go look it up myself.
That's funny.
Well,
So, Catherine, if you're watching,
this is your warning.
yeah.
Well, ladies, why don't we jump into Roadshow, because I know we all watched it and were, of course, enthralled with it once again. It was an excellent episode, I thought.
Very good episode.
It was good. I loved the First Lady, Helen. She was so funny. She was so into that, wanting to be a part of Texas history, and she was. But the fact that she was reenactments, and I just loved her personality.
Mm-hmm. Very, very large personality.
Yes.
Well, you have to be in Texas.
My husband, I'm so big, my husband almost had to change his name.
I have to admit that it was pretty neat that they could get her back to the Battle of Juan Jacinto. I can never say it. San Jacinto. Ugh. I'm not only married to a native Texan. I'm not really a native Texan.
You're an Indiana gal.
I know.
Well, what kind of got me, and this is all, with, respect and everything, but she said that she was an historian in Texas history.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at how much she didn't know, and especially, the historical marker, right there where she lived.
Yeah.
But that just goes to show that, there's so much that you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Well, Valerie and the rest of you, I can also attest to, as an archivist, historians, county historians, when people come into the archives, they just assume that I know every single thing about every person that has ever lived in this county. And I try to explain to them, okay, I'm an archivist. I process the records. Of course, I'm a genealogist too, but I do my research, which is not here. And so, but it's amazing, people think that I should know, and I'm like, oh, I sure wish I did.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the problem. Yeah. What do you mean you don't know my people?
I know, exactly.
Well, I will say that the lady did mention that her father had passed, and she really hadn't been interested in her family then.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was a key
I'm
comment.
Sure that was a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. That he took that with him, so even
Talk
more,
to your family members.
Even more emphasis. Mm-hmm.
Listen, I went into, this is funny, I went into a liquor store in rural West Virginia because I was kind of turned around and I didn't know what street my our second great grandparents' house was on. I just knew kind of where it was at. Mm-hmm. And I pulled up my blog with a picture of the house and I was like, do you know where this house is? Do you know the Richmond family? They've been here forever. The lady looked at me like I was nuts.
Especially in a liquor store,
She's like, honey, have you already been drinking?
Yes.
I know, right?
Well, that's
was fun.
That's like the story that when I was in Ohio, in Akron, Ohio, my grandfather died at work. He was holding the door open for a lady to go into work, and he had a heart attack and died. Well, a few years ago, we went to my cousin's wedding, which was in Akron, and my father took us around to all the different areas where he grew up, and I went to his place of work, which was still there. And I went into the front door, and I explained to this poor woman my story about my grandfather dying. I said, which door do you think it would have been?
Oh, my God!
And she looked at me like I was nuts, and she says, well, the employees have always come in through this door over here. And yes, I went over, got my picture taken, holding the door open.
I would have done the same thing.
Yes.
You all are sick people.
Oh, you did the same thing, Shannon. We know you.
That's funny.
Oh.
Wow. So what was the next story, Valerie. You have the itinerary. I know you do.
Yes, she does.
That was Dorian Harrison with Kenyatta, and he wanted to know if his slave ancestors served in the Confederate Army like he had been told story after story.
Right. That was an interesting story. It really was. And I liked the way that they were able to use pension records. That was the pension records one, right? Yeah. To prove relationship. That was very well done.
Yes.
Well, I have a quite big question on that, and maybe they said it. I went back 2 or 3 times. Whose pension record was it?
His brothers.
It was brothers.
Correctly.
Right.
His brothers.
His brothers.
Okay. Because I kind of missed that. And I thought, well, whose pension record is this?
Yeah, because it says the letter was written by James, and it says he referenced his brother Sidney.
Well, I understand that, but they never. I just assumed it was his brother's, but I wondered if that was a letter that was in someone else's pension record. You know what I'm saying?
I could have sworn they said that we found. I don't know.
They just said we found a pension record
with this letter in it, so it could have been somebody else's with a letter written by his brother for somebody else's pension record.
That's what I was thinking. It didn't come across as his pension almost to me.
Right. Oh. Well, for Confederate soldiers, the pensions would have been granted by the states, obviously not the federal government. So. And there were African Americans who did receive pensions by the Confederate by the states for service in the Confederate Army. That was not uncommon. So I don't know. That's one of those questions we would have to ask them and see if they would tell us.
Yeah, because see, I just put down the letter was in the Civil War pension file, written by James, referencing his brother, saying that he served in the Confederate. Well, actually, yeah, and that it was his third great uncle.
So I don't think they ever said whose pension file it was.
I don't think they did. But you know, with editing, editors may have thought that we would have just jumped to the correct conclusion. But obviously, they don't.
But we genealogists know better. We have to have the proof.
That's right. That's right.
And that one point, genealogy big point, is the very last slide. I didn't notice it in the other 2 episodes, but this one I did. The very last slide in the bottom right-hand corner saying that some of the research had been taken out or due to editing for time and so forth. That many of the research and the documents is not in this episode. And I didn't know. Yeah, I wanted to I still saved it so I could take a picture of it. But yeah, I didn't notice that claim before. So.
What were you going to say, Terry?
My favorite thing about the Confederate records is they'll have that rebel records.
You rebel, you.
I know. It cracks me up.
Well, so you all noticed that there was kind of a bleep in there of misinformation, and maybe we one of you all bring up so we can correct it here.
Who is going to jump on
his mark? What his mark means? And I'll tease Kenyatta later.
Who would like to explain what his mark means?
Well, it means that he couldn't sign his own name. He didn't know how. The X was his mark. That was his signature.
Exactly. Not that he was literate and knew how to read.
Right. I'm going to assume that there were some editing issues that made it look like...
I've looked at it 3 times, though, and it clearly stated, I even wrote it down, that he knew how to write, even though they were not allowed to read and write.
It had to have been an editing issue.
So, yeah.
So the saving... So me being the, optimist in the conversation, it could be something like... I have a pension record where it took several years for it to be proved. And so at the beginning, when the process started, the gentleman could sign his name. And by the end, he was so ill, he no longer could. So maybe they edited it and cut it.
That's a really long stretch.
Very far, Shannon.
Well, I'm trying to give him benefit of the doubt because anybody who's done research for any amount of time knows that if there's an X there, it means they could not sign their name for whatever reason, be it illness, be it illiteracy, whatever the reason was. They had a mark instead of a signature.
Right.
So,
and we know from other episodes when they had said something incorrect, we know that they can't during the editing. They don't have control over that.
is Sherry trying to say something?
Right. Yeah. I was just.
Sherry, is she breaking up for everybody else too?
Yeah.
Yes.
You want to try again?
Now I see that she
she's
froze.
stuck.
Yeah, I think she's having some technical difficulties.
Hard.
Okay. Well,
Sign back out and come back in, dearie.
I wondered about like what Shannon said about Kenyatta, if it wasn't edited and if there was something that she did present that showed that he could read and write or write, and that it wasn't included in the story, and so.
yeah, anything is possible, unfortunately, but we won't know.
Well, Val said she's going to reach out to her.
Yep.
So
Let us
you'll have
know.
to next week.
Okay, I will.
Oh, I see Sherry moving again.
I don't
You
see
there,
it.
Sherry?
Am I from?
No.
A ghost image.
Yeah, you keep coming in and out, sweetie. You may need to come back. So what was the next segment, Valerie? I'm just going to let you continue.
Lacey from Oklahoma, and Josh gave the presentation, and she wanted to know if she was Native American because she was too white to be black and too black to be white. I loved this segment because I worked with Dawes roles.
It was excellent. Go ahead,
Yes.
Terry. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say that one's the one that really kind of spoke out to me out of all of them. Because I usually watch TV and do 5 other things while I'm watching TV, and I think I actually watched her whole segment.
Me too.
And just the whole thing. I was raised with my mother. She raised me white. I would go to my dad's house, and it was black, and I just didn't fit. Living your whole life not knowing where you fit is hard.
I can imagine.
So you kind of feel for her.
Yeah. And there were really good things. There were a couple maps. The Josh being on the production crew really came out as far as the education, yet again, in this episode, but during this whole segment. Look at the amount of records they showed.
I didn't know he was on the production crew this year.
Yes, he is.
You haven't been watching our show then.
I said that after the first episode. No, I'm sorry.
No, actually, he has started as a producer of the show, so he is more involved with the production aspect of it. So you can see it in some of the segments coming through a little bit, I think.
So I hadn't even noticed his name at the end under producers.
I don't think he's a producer, but he's involved with the production element now.
Right.
He's being more involved in that segment than just a presenter.
Interesting. Very, very interesting.
What I was excited about, because the historian in me came out, because I love it when they talk about little known or parts of history that can be presumed, especially incorrectly. And they talked about how Native Americans actually owned slaves and moved the slaves with them.
Yes.
Oh, right.
And I think that's an aspect of history people didn't realize.
I had no clue.
Mm-hmm. And then how it was extremely unfair that then once they became free, they couldn't claim to be part of the reservation and vice versa. You know, they couldn't, even though they had been moved there forcibly, they now couldn't claim to be part of the reservation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I felt bad for this gal because she got like dinged a couple of times. You know, no, you're not related by blood, but you have you have the culture, and then to find out, you know, that the one side, you know, had this, you know, stamped refused because they purposely moved them to Kansas, and I'm going, oh, you know, please don't yell at Kansas. At least not until after I leave next week. But I felt so bad for her, you know.
But I think she got, in the end, she got good answers. You may not be biologically within that, but you can claim that heritage because that was your family's heritage. So, I mean, that's like saying you mix and blend your families. You've got step parents and whatnot, and you've got, you know, an Italian stepmother and, you know, the Irish father or whatever. You might not be Italian, but you certainly were raised in an Italian house.
Exactly.
You were raised Italian.
Right.
Yeah, it's there. So I don't know.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Both sides of her family, you know, both the female and the male lines, that were very much a part of, you know, America and the history and what was going on, and that it was really cool that, you know, that she's living in Oklahoma, where this ended up being, you know, partially at. So she does have a lot of part of history that she can pass on to her son. So.
Well, how about the fact that her ancestors walked alongside of them during the Trail of Tears? Holy wow!
So that's dedication. That is, you know, something bigger than what I probably could have done, but you know.
I mean, I don't know if any of you have read any of the books on any of that, but we've read a few. We went to South Dakota many years ago and went down to the reservation.
Oh, yeah?
And actually sat and talked to a Native American woman for, it seemed like hours. And she had this scrapbook with all of the newspaper articles, like going through the chronological, you know. My nap's coming through.
Timeline.
Yeah, going through the timeline. Just everything that happened, and it was just extremely sad to be on that ground and to hear. I mean, we were at the church where the cemetery was, and you know, it was very, very emotional just to stand there and know what happened. Even if your people weren't touched.
Do you think they walked due to a sense of family because that was her family, or do you think they were forced to walk?
That's a good question. They probably
you don't know anything else is home.
Yeah. That's your family that's your family going.
That would be my thought.
Yeah.
Oh, before we all start crying, Valerie.
Well, then there were two little short clips, and I really liked the photograph that they showed and the reaction of the person. That was really cool.
That was pretty awesome.
Yeah. But the next segment was Kalina with Kenyatta, and she was finding out if her great-great-grandfather escaped from Andersonville. This was another one that I really liked.
Yeah, I know, and I'll be honest with you. I was like, that's a doozy of a tale. This will be interesting, and I was, to be honest with you, I was completely expecting it to be false.
Me too.
I was like, oh, that's a great story. It can't be true.
Well, I thought maybe he could escape once, but she had heard that he escaped twice.
Right.
And I thought, no, there's no way.
But it's pretty amazing that they could actually document it through, muster and service rolls, that he was there when it opened. And I just can't imagine the hell that was to go through.
Oh, it was horrific. Just horrific.
And to have survived it, even worse. I'm one of these strange historians where for a while I had a fascination with the Sultana disaster. Have you ladies heard of that before?
Sultana?
Yeah, the largest, it like rivals the Titanic for a water disaster. It was actually a riverboat disaster on the Mississippi.
Yes.
Wasn't it out in Tennessee?
Just off of, it was over 3,000 people died in it, and they were mostly ex-prisoners from Andersonville going home.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Yeah, so that was I was wondering if that was going to be brought up because I'm one of those weird historical fact things that are in my head. Because I mean, people who went to Andersonville and actually survived that, and then some of them actually died there. But and he was lucky in that it sounded like he was paroled or in a prisoner exchange.
Yeah.
Well,
because I didn't know anybody was paroled from there, so it must have been a prisoner exchange.
But I think it was Finding Your Roots that they had the Andersonville in. It was right around there because
it was Kelly Clarkson on Who Do You Think You Are?
Who Do You Think You Are? Okay.
Is that what it was? I knew I'd seen it before.
And so they had a little bit on there, but this one really brought it back for me because the numbers, like it was built for 10,000, there were 33,000, there were 13,000 that died, and putting, I don't know, it was because I had done research on my husband's side from that. In between, and so now it caught me even more. But and then to see the newspaper explaining who Limber Jim was, and I go, oh no, that can't done now.
I was surprised they didn't talk more about that because they brought it up briefly that he might be him, and they just dropped it off.
Right? Yeah.
Well, it could have been cut too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You always have to go with it. Could have been cut.
Yep. That is the standard clause, right?
Well, this one and the other two, they've been so meaty and so much, and people, like we have said, gosh, wish they would show more records, and there's just record upon record, and like I had never seen a POW record, so that was really cool, and so, you can only show so much, and, but yeah, it's like, why don't you talk more about that newspaper article?
It would be really cool to see them do a blog to go alongside it with all the records.
Wouldn't that be fantastic?
That'd be good.
And
now,
the maps.
There is a blog. It does cover some of the stuff that's not covered, like additional information about the historical aspects. But I think you're right. I think it would be great if they would add a little bit of a behind the scenes or a documents that were cut or that type of information.
They could do an extra episode at the end where they show us everything that they cut out.
Right.
Well, I think a couple
we don't want much.
No.
No, we have to do that. I think something important to say, and only because when Who Do You Think You Are went to Andersonville, we actually reached out to Andersonville to see if they were willing to join us to talk. And they were very nice enough. They replied a very lengthy letter basically stating that they didn't have the time or the manpower to do it. But for everybody to please keep in mind, they have no records. They cannot help you research. Go to the archives.
Yeah.
But I learned something in this, and don't laugh because I haven't done a lot of I've done very small amounts of Civil War research.
You going to talk about muster rolls?
Yes, I didn't know.
I didn't know that either.
Okay, good. I don't feel stupid.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm glad you did.
You didn't know what?
I didn't know that a muster roll was like an attendance record.
I've
heard the term a million times.
But I didn't know how often it was taken.
Well, what did you think it was?
I knew what it was.
Well, if you haven't done that much into the pension files, you wouldn't see the muster roll.
But muster rolls are not in pension files.
No,
they're not.
No, they're separate.
They are separate.
They're separate.
But the cards, the muster roll cards.
No, they're separate.
They're separate.
They're separate.
Well, on fold 3, they're all in the same.
That's fold 3. That is totally different.
Okay, well, we need to point this out to our public.
Okay,
and
so you all need to come to DC and let me just take you.
I was going to say, okay, Mr. National Archives.
Shannon.
Yes.
I am also correct, I think, in that the muster rolls that we see were not written during the Civil War.
That is
correct. You're correct. Yes, you're correct.
That is correct.
Yes. When were they written?
They were compiled later.
Yes.
So how the heck did they remember that arbitrarily on June the 2nd, John Smith was the one?
Because what
they're copying. They're
copying
the original records.
Yeah.
So they're derivative sources. They're not original.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to go back to my pension files that I got from Washington and look at them, and then I'm going to rewatch that segment.
Yeah, because service records
they're service
and
records.
muster rolls are separate pools from pension files. They are stored separately. So when you
you being a difficult pull,
I was
hey, that's not nice. So when you get when you pull a pension record now, and I will put out there as a caveat, since they're digitizing so many pension records, if you can find a pension record on microfilm or on Fold 3, they will not pull it for you at the National Archives.
Oh,
yeah.
They will not,
sense.
because what they do is they archive those, so they don't have to keep pulling them out.
Yeah.
But what if I want to hold the original?
Yeah.
Nope, not unless you can argue with the archivist on duty that it's a bad copy.
That's kind of BS. Are they saving the records for the public?
They are putting them in conservation after they're digitized.
Well, whatever.
So they won't be destroyed. And that's the whole idea, is they're starting from the oldest records and moving forward. So as they digitize them, they are going into basically storage, so they will no longer be accessed unless you have a very good reason to see the original. Because they don't want people to handle them.
That's not fair.
And your good reason can't be because my great grandpa held this?
No. So you're running out of time on the 1812 ones, just so you know. You can still pull Civil War pension files because those are not being digitized yet.
And if you have Confederates, you're okay because they're at the state level.
Right, and the Confederates are at the state level, so you have to go to the individual state for that. But
at the state level, the Confederate records are also, you have the service records, which are separate, and the pension records, which are separate.
Yeah.
They're totally separate.
Yeah. And so, like, when you go to the National Archives, you actually have to go to 2 different departments to request those different records. The pension files are through one department where you make all of those, and then the service and muster records are through a different department on a different form. So
so we're going to set up an IAG field trip to the National Archives.
Yes, we are.
I'm bringing my pillow.
Okay. I'll loan my 9-year-old out for when they do the National Archives sleepover. How about that?
I'm there.
But yeah, so when the service records come in an archival box, and they're alphabetized and numerical, and so you find where your person is in the box. And when you request a pension file, they come in an individual folder. And they actually combine, if there was an invalid, a widow, and a minor, they'll all be in one file. They combine all the files into one, so you don't have to request 3 different ones.
That's good.
Is any of this in Cindy's book?
Is any of this in Cindy's book? I don't know.
I mean, did we just gloss over?
I would go look, but I accidentally sold it.
Yeah, mine's not over here either.
Hang on, Jen's looking.
Oh, look.
Well, while she looks, what's the next story, Valerie?
The next one was with Mark and Josh, and did the military play an important role? Revolutionary War and War of 1812. It's like, oh my gosh, the third great grandfather serving in both. Did I get that right?
Well,
I think.
his fourth great grandfather was a drummer boy. They found that out.
Okay.
Yeah, wasn't he like 14, 15?
He was,
He was young.
Yeah.
Poor Jen, she's over there looking for the book now. Yeah, so he was a drummer boy in the Revolution, and then was it him that served again in 1812, or was it his son that served in 1812?
I thought it was a father-son, but maybe I misunderstood.
I thought it was a father-son too. What
yeah,
you have written down?
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I'm going back through here. Yeah, because he said before we can look at your fourth great grandfather, that we do have the name, you have to go to the previous generation. So again, there's the learning education part.
Right.
And there was I thought this was great because it was a letter by a lady in 1936 that wrote to the Veterans Administration and had, gave dates and so forth, and then had mentioned both. So.
Right. Yeah. And so this is what I'm going to point out, that when you find pension records from Revolution, 1812, and Civil War, you will actually find letters like that in them from people who are doing research in the early 20th century, wanting to find out more about their ancestors. And those letters are amazing because they usually tell you a little bit about them, so you figure out how they're related, because obviously they'll now be a cousin if it's your family, right? And they sometimes say, I'm requesting information on this person. Occasionally they'll tell you why. Sometimes it's for lineage society, sometimes it's because they're doing a family history, and then you'll always have immediately following it the reply from the War Department.
Well, Josh even pointed out that they weren't sure how that lady was related yet.
Right.
And brought up. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Valerie. I was going to say, you could assume that they're related in some way if they're asking for information.
Oh,
you just have to figure it out. Yeah. I like those letters.
Yeah. That's my Patriot for the DAR had all of those, I'm researching so-and-so, this is what I have, and then the reply, we have blah, 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 and the information we have on that is this. So it's good to kind of follow it. It gives you, a couple avenues of research.
So Jen is back. Does she have an answer?
Yeah. I don't have an answer because apparently my copy is out in the garage.
Oh.
I have not unpacked it yet from the Ohio Genealogical Society conference.
We'll have to get back to everybody on that answer.
Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll pull up the PDF and take a look at that.
Oh, okay. She can do that on her computer.
Well, yeah. You could too if you wanted to.
I'm not jinxing my internet connection.
No, I'm not doing it now right now.
I was going to say.
Well, I'm not going to do it
PDF and I'm
now.
Anything.
Actually.
So any other comments on the Revolutionary War 1812 episode before we move on to the next one?
Well, what I did like was the report of the official journal of the House of Representatives, and that and to bring it out because I didn't really realize that was read on the floor. You could just see Josh's eyes get as big as saucers.
I just thought it was great. He was the pension.
So I want to point out that to people, in case they don't know this, that a lot of that research you can do, some of those private records, particularly for people who were receiving pensions from the Rev War in 1812, you can find that information on Google Books because all of the laws and the minutes from the congressional floor are on Google Books. So if you put in your ancestor's name, sometimes you can get records like that.
Interesting.
There was one of my ancestresses, yeah, I guess that's what you can call. Her name was Bathsheba Harper. I love the name
that
Bathsheba.
name, Bathsheba.
Bathsheba
I have a
Harper.
Bathsheba LeBrock.
So her father was in the Revolutionary. Her father was in the Revolutionary War, and her mother applied for some sort of relief, and her mother died before she got it. But she received it in her stead, and that is read and is in the minutes as a private act read out on the Congress floor.
Wow.
And you can go ahead, Terry.
I was just saying, I think we have one woman left receiving pension from the Civil War.
It's actually a brother and a sister. They live in North Carolina.
Of course you would know.
She would know.
I am full of useless information.
She calls useless, but it's really good tidbits.
They did a story on it last fall, I want to say it was, and for some reason I remember reading it because it was right around, something that was going on up here. But it's a brother and sister. They're both in their 90s, and they are the last living children of a soldier. And so they are still drawing a Civil War pension. They're in their 90s. So, I think they said, like, their father died when they were, like, 2 and 3 years old. They were, like, under 5 when their father died. But they're the survivors.
Yeah. Crazy.
Is that freaky or what?
Well, it's just like that one president who still has a grandson living and he's been dead forever.
Can I tell you who it is? Because I know.
Zachary Taylor.
Zachary Taylor. Yep.
Really?
Zachary Taylor still has a living grandchild. But he didn't have his kid till he was in his 70s.
Jeez.
Oh, gosh.
Generations. I mean, it's like my grandmother, who was one of 19. Okay?
Wow.
And she was born in 1917, but her father remembered the Civil War because he was 5 when it started.
Wow.
So my great-grandfather was born 100 years before my mother, because they were both. My great-grandfather was born in June 1856, and my mother was born in June 1956.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, that's good.
Yeah. So I am, two steps away from a Civil War ancestor, because I've told you the story, right, about him telling my grandmother about watching his brothers march away. Have I not told you this story? So they lived in Tuscarawas County, Ohio, and when he was 5 is when they were camped right next to us at OGS too. I had wonderful conversations with them. When he was 5, his older 3 brothers joined the Union Army. And he told my grandmother when she was a little girl, he died in 1929, so she was 11 or 12 roughly when he died. But she remembers vividly him telling her and her older nieces and nephews, who were all about the same. The first child was born in 1885, last child born in 1921. 2 wives, large family, 19 children. She remembers sitting on his lap and him telling her and the other kids about how he was holding his mother's hand in the county square, watching his brothers and their unit march off in their blues, and holding her hand, watching her cry.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
And, the emotions and people waving flags and cheering them as they are marching off with their unit from the county seat in Ohio off to the Civil War. And luckily, his 3 brothers came back. He was the youngest at the time. But yeah, he had vivid memories of the entire war. Yeah.
Wow.
And, I mean, that's only 2 generations away from me. So it's kind of, it gives you the little willy-nillies, but yeah.
For me, it's like 4, 5, or 6, because mine all have their kids young.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so to put this even more in perspective for that side of my family, his grandfather was the immigrant ancestor in 1820.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm looking at my 3rd great-grandfather, 1820, was the immigrant ancestor.
Wow.
Gosh.
Yeah, long generations. Not normal.
That sounds right.
Oh, thanks.
That's cool. I hope you're writing these stories down.
I mean, really, are they blogged?
No, I'm bad.
Oh,
I
Come on,
know.
yo.
I know, and I really need to. And I know a lot of them, and I've told my kids them, and my husband's probably sick of hearing them because I repeat myself so often.
Well, write them down so they can just be read over and over.
Yeah, I
There you go.
really need to. But you know, sometimes I think of these stories, and I think of these little tidbits that I remember. Like my grandmother, that grandmother died when I was a junior in high school. So, God, it's been a while. That 93 is when she died. So that grandmother died in 93. My other grandmother died in 97. But I have all these strange tidbits running around in my head that I'm like, I gotta write these down. And that's when I look at my father, who just turned 77, and I think to myself, as he periodically just, oh, well, this reminded me of a story, and he tells me something I've never heard before, and I'm like, please write this down because I don't have my tape recorder.
Where's that tape recorder that belongs in your pocket?
Yeah, I know. Well, my dad's
Your
moving
phone.
in. My dad's moving in with me, so I'll have more time to tape him.
Just tape it to his shirt collar.
What were you gonna say,
All
Terry?
around.
Just show them how to type it right into WordPress.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, most everybody by now knows that my mother recently passed, and there are now stories that my dad is telling me about my mom that I'd never heard of before, and I'm like, why did she never say anything, So this should be the lesson to everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
to write
Shannon,
it down.
you need to get you a police body cam, and you need to wear it around the house.
A GoPro camera.
Or a GoPro camera.
Okay, so this is okay. So we're getting off track, which is what we are horribly good at. But I'll just tell you this one more little story. So when I was in high school, my mother's mother, who is the woman whose father told her about the Civil War, that's my mother's side of the family. She lived with us for several years. My grandmother had breast cancer and ultimately died from complications dealing with her breast cancer in her mid-70s. But she lived the last 3 years or so of her life with us, which is why I'm always an advocate of multi-generational families, because I think it's an excellent thing for kids. And my mother at the time was a resident, so she was never home. She was doing her residency in orthopedic surgery, so I saw her, once every 3 or 4 weeks. But my grandmother would sit there, and because she couldn't really do anything else, because she was going through chemotherapy and all sorts of other things and surgeries and recovering, she would sit, and while my dad was a house husband, would tell him stories. And he would periodically say something to my mom, and my mom would go, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, your mother told me this story." And she's like, "I'm her daughter, and I've never heard that story before. What are you talking about?" Because my grandmother had nothing else to do but sit and tell stories all day. So that's what she did. She sat on the couch or at the kitchen table while my dad did, house cleaning, and would follow him around the house and tell him stories about my mother's family.
Wow.
And he would periodically show up to a family reunion and say, "Oh yeah, Maxine told me blah blah blah," and people are looking at him like, "What? Where did you hear this?" But I'm trying to convince him he needs to write those down too, because I think he's the last person who knows.
Absolutely.
Oh, but yeah, write your stories. Chop chop.
Well, just I know we're dragging this out, but this past week, my mother-in-law and my husband's stepfather have been with us from Texas, and so she was telling some stories, one or two here or there, and when they left, my husband turns and looks at me and he goes, "I had no idea. Where did those stories come from?" Because she's never told them before, so it's the same thing. I mean, she hear and stories that he's never heard about his father, about her, about And so he thought he knew everything about his mother and his dad. And I'm like, well, see there?
Everybody has secrets.
I think that's something interesting that I've experienced as well. I've been often interviewing my step-grandmother, and occasionally I'll bring my husband along, and I'll be talking about stuff, and then all of a sudden I'll hear the conversation that Casey's having with my grandfather, and it's a story I've never heard before. So sometimes I think having just a new set of ears in the room makes new stories come up. And so as a result, I've been, recording all these stories as much as I can with my smartphone.
It might be too, Jen, that he thinks that he might have already told you.
True.
Right.
Yeah, he might think, I've already told her, but I haven't told Casey, and now I got a captive audience. You don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, that's not a problem in my family. We tell stories over and over and over.
My mom would do that too, especially, every weekend we'd go up from my hometown in Iowa up to southern Minnesota every weekend, and she'd tell these stories. And I can remember a few, from me being little and up to 6th or 7th grade. So when I first got started in genealogy, I gave her a tape recorder. And I said, Mom, start just telling the stories if you don't want to write them or type them. And she goes, I said, don't worry about them being in any order. And she goes, no, I've told them enough. I'm not. She just became zip-lipped. And I said, are you kidding me? In the car, captive for 2 hours, I couldn't get you to hush up, and now you're zip-lipped? Oh, but yeah, so... Anyway, so I'm trying to write those kind of things too, and what I'm doing is I'm putting them in each person's notes in my genealogy database. So, but anyway,
go ahead, Terry.
Before you cut us off, Shannon. So when I was earlier, I mentioned that was not me. I mentioned going to West Virginia, and I was looking for the house. When we found the house, we were outside, and a cousin pulled up and kind of probably wanted to know what the heck we were doing there looking at this old empty house. And when I told him who I was and how we were related, he invited us back up into his house. Called his mother, she came over. Called his uncle, he came over with his wife, and we all sat there. And they're telling me all these stories about my second great-grandfather who died in 1958.
Oh, wow.
Now, his mother, mind you, was my grandfather's first cousin. My grandfather came off of their first son, and she came off at the end of the line. So her children were my grandfather's kids' age. So the generations they're off. So this cousin whose house I was in was my mother's generation, but he was my age. So it was kind of cool. And he had all these stories about John, who had lived, this was his house that was, 2 houses away. And I just, when Al and I pulled away, we're like, I need to go back with a video camera. I need to go back and interview every last person. Because the land was family land, and John and Nettie divided that land amongst their children. And many of their descendants still live there. So, I need to go back and do that. Second thing, when you're talking about not knowing the stories, we were just recently in Florida visiting my mother, and Al says to me, did you know Russ, who's my stepfather, did you know he cooked in the Army? I said, no, I had no clue. I knew he was in the Army. I didn't know what he did. Captive audience. Somebody that doesn't know anything, and they're going to tell you more. So now I'm like, okay, so now I got to go visit all these people that I know that were in the service, and I'm not gonna lie. I have my list. So make your list, people, and go and visit these people while you can.
Very true.
There you go.
I have to say what I'm doing is, and I don't know where I got this idea from, but my husband is encouraging me to go through with it. Is my mother's memorial service is coming up, and I actually wrote out we actually have a family email list. Because I started it 10 years ago, and I asked them if they couldn't attend the service and the afterwards, the wake, if they would be interested in sharing stories. And I'm going to have a box at my mother's service for anyone who wanted to share a story about my mother, because I'm an only child, and my youngest child is 9, and I thought it would be great for my kids as they get older to know more about who their grandmother was, since they obviously won't have that interaction with them. And so far, I've received a lot of really good response from my mother's cousins.
Wonderful.
So,
makes me want to cry.
oh,
Good.
yeah, but I mean, I couldn't think of a way because I kept thinking about how, you know, my kids are going to miss out on knowing their grandmother because, you know, my youngest is 9, my oldest is 15. They only sort of knew her because, you know, we only visited twice a year and they would come up here once a year. So 3 times a year they got to see their grandparents. And they only know a lot of the stories based on what they heard then or that I've told, right? So what a way to get people to put together basically a memory book is to hear other people's stories about. So I wanted to put that out there as another way, if people are collecting stories, is that it doesn't have to be that person's story. It can be them telling you anything about anyone that they remember.
Well, this summer is the Lair family reunion. It's it's on the even years, and since the last one in 2014, we've lost 2 of the elders. My mother-in-law just recently, and then Dad's sister in October. And so I'm going to set up a video camera, and instead of just sitting around doing absolutely nothing or while people are eating and nothing's really going on, is, you know, share a story, share a thought of, you know, Burles. Everybody had, you know, stories about her and my mom-in-law, and then also about Aunt Betty. And so that can get into, because they know that I'm working on some kind of an update to the book. And so I've got a video camera and just sit there and videotape as people are talking. I can eat later, kind of thing. So, but yeah, and you can do that, you know, with the family reunion, because look, there's only 3 of, you know, there's Dad and 1 brother and 1 sister left. You know, so.
Yep.
But anyway, so the next 2 little clips were Josh and Mary giving some educational things. I loved where she says, she goes, not all the records are online. I'm going, yes. Thank you.
That's
and
right.
That call the historical society or the whatever in the area, or write a letter. Oh my gosh, what a concept. You know, you fold a piece of paper in an envelope and you stick a stamp on it.
And include a self-addressed stamped envelope so they send something back.
That's right.
Yes.
Right. So, but the last episode was Sarah and Mary Tedesco. The question was her ancestor being in the Texas Revolution.
Yes.
Which I knew nothing about, I admit.
Shame.
I know. Well, even my clients that I've had for Texas Research, they didn't even go back that far. It was, you know, you know,
I'm just married to a native Texan, but his grandparents are New Englanders, so.
Oh, well, see, let's listen to you. But yeah, so they started. Well, the first document was the ancestor chart, and yet again she said, you know, before we start with the 4th, you have to go back to the sun and letters and original.
Yep. It was pretty fantastic. It really was. Anybody else have any comments about that one? Because it was a really good segment. All the original information that was presented was just fantastic.
Right, and they didn't let anybody jump to conclusions. It was, it looks like this is what it is, but we need more, instead of just jumping to conclusions.
And I like that. I like how they kept stressing that, you know, you have to follow it methodically, and then you can't presume, but we can make a few assumptions, but we can't prove it. I like how they kept stressing those things.
Right. Right.
And how there was in the pension file that a letter, and it clearly said my father, and listed the name on the statute, and it's like, oh, I want to go see that statute.
Right. That's right.
And went on to say, and you know, that's firsthand account in an original letter.
It is.
So yeah, that was exciting. And then about the land grant, and again, it's so many different types of records, showing in the episode. And this one, I was taking notes like crazy just to learn more about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and that I wrote down on my notes, bingo, the 1849 land donation record, where the first line written was their question. He served in the battle. And I'm going, oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
It's fantastic when you find things like that, isn't it?
It is.
Well, we get I get so excited to see these people getting these kind of things.
Right.
It just tells you what's out there for you if you look in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Right. And you take your time to learn about what records are available and what history is there, and look at the social history and figure out what your ancestor could have created in their wake.
I know that they listed at the end, but I really wish, and it takes time, I know, but I wish that like Josh and Kenyatta and Mary would say, when they show a document, especially an unusual one, like an original record or something that isn't online, well, we found this at this archives. Or the reason I say that is because a lot of times the viewers may not know that, first of all, that it's not online. But if they tell where they found them, maybe that will encourage people to go to those places and find their own records.
And if they can't write them, I mean, the people that they have a good team of people doing research. Mm-hmm. Many that I believe probably all of us are friends with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you just write a blog post and get it to them? This is where I found this. This is where I found that.
Well, the same 5 researchers on the team were on this episode as the other 2. Mm-hmm. So it's the same 5.
And I think it will be for the rest of the season, however many episodes there are. I think it's just, that's the group, and that's it.
But remember what Shannon told us last week, that
she wasn't here last week, and obviously didn't watch.
Yeah, where Mary said that they cannot disclose how many hours. They can't disclose certain things about the segments, or maybe they can't say, we found this at, kind of thing. That's what you see in the credits. So all we can do is, like, I haven't erased that episode yet because I wanted to watch it again. Plus, there were 8 or 9 frames of archives, Melissa.
Yes, there were. I look at those.
Yeah, and but we can only encourage people to look at those. What archives were listed, so that on this segment you can refer to such and such a place, kind of thing.
Right. Interesting. That is interesting. I will have to go back and watch these.
Well, you've been kind of busy.
All right, ladies. We are at over an hour. Oh my gosh, we talk a lot.
It's so much fun.
I know. But
I learned so much from Shannon and all her information.
That's right.
Exactly, Shannon.
Wait till my dad moves in. I'll sick him on you.
We're looking forward to Dad joining us.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, we are.
But is there anything that we missed before we sign off for this evening?
No. I'm excited. The next one's in Boston. That should be interesting.
Well, actually, there were 3, and then there's going to be a best of our favorite shows episode, and then 3 more. So next week should be the favorite stories episode.
Oh.
So the clip show will be next week. And then they're going to go Boston, Providence, and LA for the last 3.
Interesting. Cool.
So on that note, everybody, thank you for joining us this evening. We greatly appreciate you listening to us for the last hour as we talk about our favorite aspects of the show and our lives. And we will see everybody next week for another edition of Chit Chat Live with the In-Depth Genealogist. And don't forget, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, or just want to talk to us, please feel free to tweet us, follow us on Facebook, send us an email, or just comment on the YouTube channel below. And on that note, we will see you next week. And don't forget to go in depth with all of your ancestors. Bye.
Bye.